So the first speaker that I'm going to invite today is Nrsimha Kavaca Prabhu. Nrsimha Kavaca Prabhu, can you please make way to the stage? As some of you may have noticed who participated in the whole program yesterday, it's an attempt at the VIPLAVAH symposium that we bring to the participants and to the educators various aspects of education. Prabhu, you can, in the meantime, please settle down here on the stage. And we try to invite speakers from wide spectrum of education, and ISKCON being a society that we're trying to develop for education, you can imagine that there are so many different elements of education that need to be covered. Kids education, adult education, within kids education, Shastric education, adult education, so many different aspects. But then there is another element of Brahmanical education. Srila Prabhupada in his talk, he began by talking that we want to establish that culture, the Brahmanical culture. So I requested His Grace Nrsimha Kavaca Prabhu, who is the minister for ISKCON Deity Worship Ministry, to come and share with us and discuss with us this very important element. And the discussion topic is Happy Deities, Happy Devotees. Do you have a mic, Prabhu? Your mic is there. I have to put it on. Just give me 1 minute. You can start your conversation and I'll start.
Hare Krishna. So actually, the topic I was sent, which is what I worked on, was called Brahminical education. And the idea was how to develop knowledge through deity worship. And just while Tapa Mishra was setting up this presentation, it was kind of interesting to get such a topic, because just like looking at knowledge in itself, personally I don't find that such a difficult thing to train people in. And just to give you an example, we just finished our semester here at the Mayapur Academy, our international diploma in Archan, and we had about 30-something students, and part of the training they receive is they learn how to do like what we call Sodas Upachar Puja, means like how to offer 16 items of worship to the deity. And in the assessment, which they're doing without a book, they're doing it all from memory, there's 143 assessment steps they need to go through, and they're doing it all by memory. So it may seem like a lot, but when you actually think of it, it's not that difficult. I saw a news article the day before yesterday where there's this dog who'd learnt how to identify 45 things by name. So if a dog can do 45 things, if they're doing 143 things, it's only 3 times better than a dog. Yeah? So it's not really, to me, that's not what education's about. Yeah? And as soon as I get the presenter tool, I'll be able to get more into. Yeah, I'll be done by then. Yeah, because I got to go. All right. So, as you saw, that was the presentation I got. The topic I got in the email: real knowledge transfer through deity worship. Now, of course, you can unpack this in different ways. What is real knowledge? Knowledge is one thing, and as we all understand, there's different elements of knowledge. There's just simply recall. There's being able to articulate the knowledge. There's so many different ways you can, look at knowledge. But I like to go further than that. Now we look, what is the essence of training and education? I think that's really something as educators we need to look at. As I say, it's more than just knowledge, because so many people can, learn things quite easily, and some people are very expert. I mean, I've seen people recite whole chapters of the Bhagavad Gita, verbatim, but do they actually understand the purpose of the Bhagavad Gita? Yeah? So, is it simply about imparting skills and knowledge? Now, in a deity worship course, you might think that, because deity worship, as you understand, is largely a skills-based practice, or a skills-based topic. probably more than 50% is skills-based. But, my point is that I think it's much more than that. And for us, the real challenge is the values. How to, this is what we focus on, is nurturing values in the students. And this is actually the real challenge, because you're faced with two types of challenges here. One is how to actually impart values, and just by reading a book to them, that's not going to work. You have to go a lot deeper than that. And the other thing is how to assess values. Because again, the values, like if, for instance, you're doing a knowledge assessment, it's easy. They just write the things down on a piece of paper, you get it, and you compare it with what your marking guide says, and you understand. They understand the knowledge. Or if it's a skill, I sit down, they do Archman, and we assess, we see. But how to assess values, this is a really interesting point. Then, what else we got? Okay, let's look here a little bit at the benefits. Sorry, I'm kind of like trying to coordinate between two things here. It's a little bit strange. Sorry, I'll just turn this off. Sorry. So, what is the benefit of developing values? Now, there's a few interesting sections in the scriptures. There's in Prabhupada's writings that help us to understand this a bit more clearly. For instance, there's the section in the 9th canto about the pastimes of Lord Ramachandra. And there's a really interesting purport in the 10th chapter of the 9th canto, verse 50, where Srila Prabhupada talks about how you cannot enforce good citizenship. One actually has to be trained to develop the values of good citizenship. And another interesting section in the Gita, where the Lord is talking to Arjuna about how by developing the values of a Vaishnava, one becomes dear to him. And that whole section, the 12th chapter, from text 13 through to 19, and he repeatedly makes this point, how that person becomes dear to him. So you can see there's actually so much benefit, because as Prabhupada's talking about in the 9th canto, it means that if one understands values, if one understands what it means to be a human being and how to function in society, then they're able to actually function in society, and society will function. But we see that Prabhupada talks so much about how the modern society is just a society of rogues and thieves. I mean, just go buy something in the marketplace and you'll experience that. Especially for those of us who have white skin. Immediately the price is like 50% or 100% more, just because of the skin color. So you can see there's so much of this cheating going on in society. Why is that? Because what is their value? It's the dollar sign. They just want money. So because their values are a little bit messed up, then anyhow, they don't understand the proper way to interact, and therefore the society, therefore you have to have so many rules and regulations in society to stop people from doing these things. But it doesn't work, because they still do all these things. I was having a conversation with one devotee a few days ago about the drug problem, and like in Australia for now, at least in Sydney, I live in the state of New South Wales, and there's the main city in New South Wales is called Sydney, and now they have there what they call safe shooting houses, where drug addicts can come and they can get clean needles to inject, so they don't die of some disease transmitted by the dirty needles. So to me, that indicates the society's failed. They don't understand how to deal with the problem. And their solution is to try and convince everyone to stay home and watch television so they can imbibe the types of values they're going to learn from television. So we can see society is actually failing because they don't understand what's the real value of life. Okay, so the next thing we could look at is, just briefly, is how do we develop values? Now, there's been a lot of studies done over the years about this by various personalities, and there are many things that can assist in developing values, but the thing that I've experienced, which is the most important, is modeling. If we model the values that we're expecting others to imbibe, then that's the most successful thing. Just like we see with Srila Prabhupada, for instance. devotees were so inspired to follow Srila Prabhupada. Why? Because of the values he lived, because of the values he held dear, because of the person he was. But we see that like so often in society and with different personalities, they may present different values, but they don't live the values they're presenting. Therefore, what happens is people get disillusioned with them, they disregard them, they don't listen eventually. But if we're able to demonstrate the values we're trying to encourage in others, then you'll see that these lessons will go deeper. Yeah? It's the same with, I remember, just to give an example from my own life, is when I was a child, in my early teens, my mother was always telling me, don't do drugs, they're bad for you. Right? But guess what? Every day she was smoking a packet and a half of cigarettes and drinking alcohol, and every night getting drunk. So what's the value of that lesson? I didn't take it seriously at all because she wasn't modeling the behavior. Yeah. Okay, so the next thing I wanted to look at was just with the training we do at the Mayapur Academy. And not just the Mayapur Academy, when I travel around the world, I do training wherever I go. And how does the training we're doing assist in developing values? Now, we do it at many, many levels. And also, we'll talk a little bit about assessing the values here also. Excuse me, because for me, this is a really key element. Because, you can talk about values in class, and you can have devotees list the values that you're looking for. And basically what I found happens a lot of times is when you're doing written assessments, is they just figure out what it is you want to hear and they write it down so they get a good mark. But that's not indicating they've actually learnt anything, neither is it indicating that they've imbibed the values. Yeah? And that's the trick. So, and I remember one time I was doing different types of exercises to try to get to try to see if devotees were taking up the values. I remember one time that I did this exercise where I would come in half an hour early and I'd turn the classroom upside down. Push the chairs over, push the tables over, papers all over the place, stuff like that. Just to see what the response was. Because there's a really interesting pastime that took place here in Mayapur, that Srila Prabhupada was on his morning walk. And where the Samadhi is now, there used to be a ring road, and on the Ganga side of the ring road there was a row of workers' cottages, and there were some toilets there. And Prabhupada was walking and he saw this door there and he said, what is that? And he pushed the door open with his cane, and it was actually the doorway to the toilets that the workers were using. And the toilets were overflowing onto the floor. Srila Prabhupada got quite upset. And just as he was sort of berating the manager there, Chutananda turned up, who was one of the leaders here in Mayapur at the time. And he really chastised him severely. And he said, because this is in the mode of ignorance, and because you are in the mode of ignorance, you do nothing. So we can see that, like when you mix two things the same, there's no reaction. If you mix two things opposite, there's a reaction. Like if you mix an acid and alkaline, you'll get a reaction. But if you mix two equal acids, nothing happens. So we can understand by the way a person responds to an environment where they're at. So I tried doing that, messing it up, and it worked the first once, I think. The second time, the support staff at the school, they cleaned it up. So the exercise didn't work, so I stopped doing that one. So we're working on different exercises. Like every day, for instance, we have the students clean the school. And this helps us to see a lot about where they're at, because if they value the cleanliness, they're there early, they want to make sure they do their bit really well. And the ones who don't come, or who come late, or who sort of just don't really clean very well, you can understand, they don't value cleanliness. Every day during the temple worship class, we have them clean archman cups, and we assess the archman cups. And the first few days, you can see the cups are not so clean. Then after they're understanding what we mean by clean, you see most of them get the cups very clean. So you see so many small things. There's a lot of small things we do to try to assess that. And then we have, also to have the association of devotees like Jananivas Prabhu, Pankajanga Prabhu, Adi Purush. We have, a lot of very, Banu Swami also, he comes and teaches. They get the association of a lot of senior devotees. And this is a really key element, I feel, to one developing qualities, is to actually, see the principles in practice. And then also, we have a unit called Brahminical Culture and Ethics, which is our starting unit, and that's describing the characteristics of a Brahma, the activities of a Brahma, the qualities of a Brahma, all these different types of things. Yeah? Okay, so just a few quick points here. This is from the Chaitanya Charitamrita. It's Prabhupada's quoting Jiva Goswami's Bhakti Sandarbha. And he points out that it's the opinion of Bhagavatam that deity worship is not actually necessary. Yeah? Oh, actually, I didn't get onto that slide. Sorry, working with two computers. Well, that's interesting. Yeah. No, I thought I pressed the right one anyhow. Okay, so Jiva Goswami, this is quoting from Bhakti Sandarbha 283-84. He says, Bhagavatam's opinion, deity worship is not actually necessary. Also, he says that without practicing deity worship, one can achieve the complete success of human life by ending the other process of devotional service. So then one might wonder, why is it that we do deity worship? Why is it that Srila Prabhupada and the previous acharyas have indicated this is really important? So the next part of this sloka, or this verse that he's quoting, is very important. The material conditioning of most candidates for devotional service requires they engage in this activity. Yeah? And then he goes on to explain, when we consider their bodily and mental conditions, we find the character of such candidates is impure and their minds are agitated. And the thing I find particularly interesting about this was, when did Jiva Goswami say this? So about 500 years ago. So he's saying people are agitated then. What about now? Yeah? I mean, there's no such thing as Facebook or Snapchat or any of the, I mean, there's so many things out there nowadays, I can't even remember them. But, people's minds are very, very disturbed in this day and age. So, therefore, we see, as we see in the next slide that Jiva Goswami is explaining, to rectify this conditioning, the great sage Narada and others have recommended that we do deity worship. And he makes the point in the this next section here is, sorry, we skipped the slide, I think. Oh, no. Yeah, this one here. But he's actually saying this. I didn't put all of it in there because it's quite a long reference, but he's saying that actually at the point of initiation, a person's obliged to engage in deity worship. So then we could look at, what is it that Jiva Goswami is actually stating here? So what is he stating here? He's actually stating, because if we look at it a little bit sort of more deeply in terms of the Pancharatric and the Bhagavat, we have a process which is a mixture of both. This Prabhupada explains it in many places. Now, at the point of when we're, when we first come to devotional service, we're quite affected by the modes of material nature. We're quite affected by various conditionings. Therefore, the Pancharatric process is particularly applicable for us, because this helps us to cleanse all the anarthas from the heart. This helps us to, bring this karayodaya, to bring out the original nature of the jiva. So until we get to the point of where rag, the rag side is more dominant, then we really have to put a lot of emphasis on the Bhagavat, the Pancharatric side, to assist us in this purification. Yeah? And like oftentimes we might hear this, that but deity worship is only for Brahmin types or pujaris or people who like ringing bells and waving incense. Actually, no. Srila Prabhupada is making the point here in this purport. Also, Jiva Goswami is making the point that actually everyone is obliged at the point of initiation to engage in the process of deity worship. And you see, like every morning you go to the temple to take darshan. What are you doing? You're engaging in deity worship. You attend Mangalarti, you attend Guru Puja, you attend all these different functions, darshan, etc. You're engaging in deity worship. You go to the festivals, you engage in deity worship. Or another way you could look at it is, what would ISKCON be like if we had no deities? It would be a very different environment. Yeah? Very, very different environment. And it would just be a building, basically. And even that, you probably wouldn't need a building. So this is the point I feel here, a very important point that Jiva Goswami is making, is that deity worship is actually for everyone. And I feel that everyone needs to really put some time aside in their lives to focus on developing a relationship with Krishna through his deity form. Because as we know, there's a really beautiful story that's described in the Madhya Lila, the story of Sakshi Gopal. And then there's at one point there, the Brahmana, he says to the deity, he says, "My dear Lord, you're not a statue, you're directly the son of Nanda Maharaj Krishna." And so later on, the deity and this Brahmana are having a conversation. So that's a very interesting point to start with too, is that they're having a conversation. The deity is talking back. And then at one point he says to the Brahmana, the Brahmana says to the deity, "I want you to come to be a witness." And then Krishna says, "But I can't walk, I'm a deity." And then the Brahmana, he responds to Gopal, he says, "But my Lord, if you can talk, you can walk." Yeah? And then he says, "Let's go." So he had that faith. And how did he develop that faith? Was through developing a relationship. Yeah? And you'll see, in all these different instances where the devotees have that kind of faith, like nearby here in Ambika Kalna, there's another example of where Raghunandan Thakur he also had the same faith. So if we have the faith, we'll have the interaction. How do you develop the faith? Is by engaging in the practice of deity worship. And the practice of deity worship helps us to develop the qualities, the values that I was talking about at the beginning. Okay.
Thank you.
So that's about all I have to say. Is there any questions at all? Pancharatna
Questions?
Prabhu. Pancharatna Prabhu.
This is extremely important.
You don't say.
Values education. How do we impart values? And I got something from you that seemed very, very striking, that when you try to teach values in words, it can be just regurgitated and you don't know, has anything actually come in? And it seems, from what I'm hearing from you, that the values come out through things like association with people who have those values. And it also appears, from what I'm hearing here, that the process of deity worship develops those values in a person, just in a sort of a transcendental way. Is that correct?
It's definitely there. And just to refer to your first point, my belief is that if you're not imparting values, it's not education. Because education, from my perspective, is to bring about a change in a person. And we find the amount of devotees who come to us after the courses and state that their life has changed as a result. Now, there's many levels of association that you can get through, say, attending a course like we're presenting, or through the process of deity worship. Because, okay, you're getting to associate with advanced devotees, you're getting to associate with brahmanas, and as we understand in the scriptures, it states one becomes a brahmana by associating with a brahmana. So that's one level of the development of values. But the other level of the development of values is that when you're engaging in deity worship, guess what? You're touching God directly. That's powerful. I mean, you imagine, okay, if we undo one of these bulbs and stick our finger into the socket, what's going to happen? Our whole body's going to become energized by electricity. Of course, the fuse will blow and you won't die. But the point is it's like, it's an instant transferal of energy. So in the same way, if we engage with sincerity and with faith in the process of deity worship, and this is the point that's made in the when it talks in the CC about the I think the 20th chapter about the 5 processes of bhakti, and it says Sri Motaresh Saraya Sevan, with faith and veneration. Very, very important points. It's faith, you have to accept that this is God directly. Veneration, you need to understand, I'm the servant, he is the master. Not all these different ideas we're seeing coming into deity worship these days about, the Vrindavan mood. What's our qualification? For that sort of thing. We need to understand the proper mood. And if we approach with the proper mood, then we'll get the result. But if we have some speculation, it will contaminate the result. So very, very important. You get to associate directly with Krishna. That is so powerful. Yes, Maharaj.
In my dealings with both the ISKCON Disciples course and the Bhakti Shastri training is that before you get to values, you have to have people at least comprehend and remember. Because if people can't comprehend and remember, they're never going to get to values. They're never going to. Nothing goes in and comes out. I think part of it, when you're an educator in some place where you're getting the cream of people dedicated to ISKCON, you have one experience. Where you're an educator in a place where you get the 80%, devotees who come on Sundays and bring some bags of rice and that kind of thing, you get a different crew, a different crowd of people. So at any rate, both things are there, and somehow we have to work with both of those situations. But I can see that that's also the way the Bhakti Shastri courses are designed. In the beginning, we're assessing basic memory skills, and later on we get into assessing kind of larger scale integration and understanding, and then what we really want at the end of it is values, because that's the ultimate real goal of education, as you put it.
Yeah. Although I do see like a difference, just like for instance with recall, that kind of education is particularly effective with children because they'll remember so much information and they're able to regurgitate it, but they don't understand the application. Whereas an adult, if one is actually an adult on a human platform, they should understand the purpose of this knowledge. And that's really, that's one element of it. And the other element, I think, is also, the concept of Sambandha, Abhidaya and Prayojana, is you need to, and that's why we're quite specific about who we admit to the courses, because we need to have some fairly clear idea of where the devotees are at. Because if you get someone, I remember years ago, I made this point several times, we had someone attend the course who didn't even know Srila Prabhupada's pranam mantra. Which, for me, being a member of ISKCON and not knowing a basic thing like Prabhupada's pranam mantra means like you're in a different universe. And so, if we understand where the devotee is at and we understand where we want to get them, then we know how to get them there. So.
One more question here,
Yes.
Brenda Mataji.
Yes, Brenda Mataji.
Nrsimha Kavaca Prabhu, thank you so much. This has been so inspiring because yesterday we talked a lot about it's not education if transformation of the heart doesn't take place, but this is very practical. You've actually been assessing individuals to see how their values are if they've imbibed the values. And although I'd like it sometime to hear a lot more about the methods by which you're assessing that, right now I'm asking, what do you do if you see that they have not imbibed the values that you're trying to impart to them?
Yeah, it really depends what lacking we're seeing. Generally speaking, my approach is like, okay, I read a really interesting book years ago. I didn't read the whole thing, but I got a lot out of what I did read. And it was called The 6 Laws of the Teacher. This guy's done 2 books, 7 Laws of the Learner, 7 Laws of the Teacher. So one of the points he made, which I used to have on a frame in my desk, he says, facilitate means causing to learn. So if the student's not learning, it's not their failure, it's my failure. So then I need to look at, and we all understand the different types of intelligences, the learning intelligence where different devotees learn in different ways. So for instance, we have our assessment, like in the temple worship course that I facilitate, we have lots of different types of assessment methods to try to understand where they're coming from. We don't do essays at all, because I just think that is such a waste of time. And I don't want to sit down and mark 40 essays. It's just like, that's just too intense. And really, it's just like they're just regurgitating information. And we've found in the past that actually they get on the internet, they do a Google, they find someone who's already written the essay, and they just print it out and give it to you. So what's the value of that kind of stuff, But, so if we're finding that someone is not imbibing, then we need to look at a different way. Just how many different ways can we get at it? But then there's another element of values. We really have how can I put it, a very dim view of plagiarization. If someone does plagiarization, essentially we just say, sorry, you got to leave. We don't tolerate it at all. because we're trying to train Brahmins, and one of the key elements of a Brahmana in Kali Yuga is honesty. And if they can't be honest, they're not in the right place. Yeah? So we're really strict about that. Yeah? So it's just, we could talk about a lot more. I mean, we have a lot of different ways we try to look at their values. Even, we assess them going, and this is something I learned from the VIHE years ago when I attended the second semester they had in Vrindavan for the VIHE, and they assessed everyone on their sadhana, which I think, you've got to see, devotees, do they value sadhana? Because if they don't value sadhana, how are they going to bring about the change of heart? Okay.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Nrsimha Kavaca Prabhu. And devotees are welcome to continue to interact with Prabhu. Prabhu, are you planning to come back and join us for the feast? During lunchtime? 1:30. So Prabhu is going to be present during the feast at 1:30, and devotees and educators are welcome to interact with Prabhu. Thank you, Nrsimha Kavaca Prabhu, for addressing a very, very important point, very, very important principle, not a point, a principle, which is creating values through this process of education.